to say something. Lightweight, step it aside when we come in. Feel it in your chest, the syllables get pumping. People on the street get panic and start running. Words on loose leaf sheet, complete coming. I jump on my mind, I summon the rhyme I'm dumping. Healing the blind, I promise to let the sun in. Sick of the dark ways, we march to the drumming. Jump when they tell us that they want to see jumping. Dad, I want to see some fist pumping. List something, take back what's yours. Say something that you know they might attack you for. Cause I'm sick of being treated like I had before. Like a stupid standing for what I'm standing for. Like this war's really just a different brand of war. Like it doesn't cater.
All right, welcome everybody to Wide Awake Radio. I'm your host, Charlie McGrath. It is the 22nd day of February, Tuesday, and in just a minute we're going to be bringing on Christopher Greene from Greene Wave TV on YouTube, and greenwave.com is his website. We're going to talk about that a little bit, and we are not going to have a shortage of topics to cover tonight. Okay, first things first, if you're listening and you want to join in the chat, go to wideawakenews.com, click on Wide Awake Radio link, and it'll lead you into the chat room, and you can join about 90 other people who are in there right now. Eastwatch, if you're listening, I did get your message that you were having trouble posting in the chat room. I'm not really sure what's going on there, so give that a whirl again tonight. I'll keep an eye out for your messages. The show tonight is going to be, I think, all over the board. I definitely want to start out early with getting Christopher on. Because I want to talk about his new project, because I really like his website. The headlines are, they're ominous. I don't know how else to describe it. In this video I put out yesterday, I'm catching a little bit of heat from a few people saying I'm really sticking my neck out, saying, this is it, this is the collapse. I'm not sticking my neck out at all. Not at all. I mean, a matter of fact, I was probably too conservative with sticking the neck out for too long. The signs are everywhere. The Federal Reserve is putting the hammer down on printing money so they can cover the sins of their crony buddies in this corporatocracy, and that is forcing everything to go up. Every commodity that you need to live is going up. I don't care if you live in Tunisia or if you live in Toledo, your commodity prices are going up. What you have to spend money on to live is starting to go through the roof. We're seeing the poorest countries riot first. It is coming here. There's absolutely no question in my mind about it. Civil unrest has broke out in this country. Right now we see government employees rioting because they feel that they're getting a raw deal. And in a lot of ways, I agree with them. And I'm not going to get into, somebody in the chat room last night pointed out quite appropriately that I got drawn into a left-right debate, and I absolutely did. And I will not make that mistake again because I know better. I know better. I don't care about your left-right ideology. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a neocon. I don't care, what your affiliation is. The fact of the matter is we're all Americans. We've all been sold down the river. And no matter what, box you put your vote by, the red one or the blue one, we're all going down in flames together. So the idea that I'm going to get drawn back into another, these lazy state workers versus these lazy welfare bums versus these people who they took out more loan than they can afford, we were all set up together. We were all betrayed together. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no left or right anymore. You're either enlightened and awake to what's going on, or you are distracted, and you're going to have your time divided by bickering amongst yourselves while the ship is sinking. Do you think for 1 second? Do you think for 1 second the powers that be on Wall Street and in Washington give a 2 bits about the political orientation of the President of the United States, the political orientation of the people of this country? Do you think the power brokers care that I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat? They have no allegiance, only to money, only to themselves. The parties don't matter in those echelons of power. It doesn't matter. That's why Bernanke can serve under a Republican, under a Democrat. That's why Geithner, it doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat. It's all a big smokescreen con game for the power of the Congress is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay, the power of representative government has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. And Christopher and I'm not going to rant on this because I'm going to let him rant a little bit on it because my voice is still a little bit on the weak side. But the power that the idea that we have a representative republic is gone. It's gone. And I can just go back to very recent history and see that 90% of the people didn't want any of this bailout business. How much better off would we be right now if we were talking to these teachers unions and these public employee unions without the unfortunate position of being $30+ trillion further in the hole, thanks to the likes of these financial titans on Wall Street and in Washington? We would have a problem that's far, far less problematic to fix. But now we're all thrown into this kettle together, and basically we're going to be told, duke it out. We're going to have this Tea Party wave election that occurred in the midterm is going to give cover. I've said this over and over again. It's going to give cover for the Republicans to go out and say it's time to slash and burn public employees. It's time to bust these unions so we can all work for Walmart. We can all work for minimum wage. We can all have no options other than whatever the guy offering the job says to you. If it's $7.50 an hour, if you don't like it, go. What are you going to do? Go stand in a bread line. Go stand in a soup line. And guess what? The social safety net programs, they're next. Do you think that we're going to go $1.65 trillion a year in deficit in perpetuity? It's not going to happen. The biggest crime that has happened is the bailouts of the too big to fails. In the history of the planet, all of their sins had to be given to you first, and then we can talk austerity, then we can talk paying for it. The billionaire white shoe boys in Davos could give a rip less what happens to the people of this country. They could care less about the teachers' unions. They could care less about the private sector. It matters nothing to them. Their sector is the only thing that matters to them. Their sector is the too big to fail, never going to fail again, and suck the wealth out of this nation sector. They've succeeded. They've won. Everybody else has lost. And I don't care if you're a doctor on the East Coast or if you're a logger in Oregon, or if you're a teacher or if you work for the state or local or federal government all your life. We're all losing together because the too big to fail put one over on this country with the help of our federal government and with the help of our so-called representatives. All right, enough about that. Let's get to business here. I don't even know which headline to start with, so I'm going to bring on Christopher Greene first and let him pick. Christopher Greene, Greenwave TV on, am I saying that right? Greenwave TV on YouTube, and greenwave.com is your website. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that is correct, Charlie. It's Greenwave TV on YouTube, and then our website is greenwave.com. That's green with an E, wave.com. GREENEWAVE.com. Great site. I've checked it out quite a few times since you've had it up and published. I see you have my very red-nosed, red-cheeked mug up there from last night's video, World in Crisis, so thank you for posting that on there. I appreciate it. Where are we? Christopher, where are we? Give me your take of the day's events. Oil, 8.5% increase. The Dow Jones shed 180 points. Are we seeing a flight out of – I'm going to keep it on economics first. Are we going to see a flight out of equities here? Are we going to see just a mass exodus of stock and a moving into all this cash that's been printed? Is it going to start to move into commodities now? And what was a ever-increasing food commodities are going to go parabolic now? And people are going to start to look for safety in precious metals? Yeah, Charlie, I sure think so. I mean, the house of cards is falling – right now in real time. And, again, this isn't something we're talking about that's going to happen in the future. This is happening right now as we speak. And we're living through this crisis, and that's exactly what it's been. It's been a crisis since the systemic crash in 2008 up into the present day. And it hasn't ended. And that's the tough, hard reality is that 2008 was just the start of, this show, so to speak, of playing out. And as you just mentioned, the big story today was, skyrocketing oil prices. Crude oil was up almost 9%. I think it closed about 8.5% higher at the end of the day today in a single day. So we've got growing global instability. Again, the house of cards has been following for weeks as we've been covering these stories on YouTube. But we have over a dozen countries in the Middle East, in northern Africa, as we look towards Libya,
and we look what's happening there. People are calling, we're even seeing somewhat of a genocide. The last, report I read said there was up to 233 people that had been killed.
How many? How many, Christopher?
233 people based on the last report.
Okay, I hadn't heard that figure yet. That's and that's what's being reported. There is no reporters there. Anderson Cooper's not running over to Libya right now. I think the mainstream media has learned their lesson in going into these countries where the United States has had influence over the leadership, namely, I think in your video today you said since 2008, and we've had this insane monetary policy impoverishing their citizens even further. But in Libya's case, we've been forgiving and Gaddafi's best buddy since the quote air quote war on terror end air quote. So they hold us responsible. And a lot of people think, rightly so, our monetary policy is what's keeping their bellies empty at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right on target, Charlie. And, hey, I admit, and this is much of what I was talking about in my video today, I hold the United States responsible. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that the unprecedented stimulus that we've just implemented, courtesy of the Federal Reserve, courtesy of Ben Bernanke, and, our Treasury Secretary, Timothy Geithner, and, all of the, rest of, the banking cartel, that all of it's going to end badly. And the case in point is the Case-Shiller Home Price Index came out today. Not sure if you familiarize yourself with today's report, but basically it has confirmed a double dip in housing. And that's been a big, major theme I've talked about on my channel for the past year, is that we are clearly in a double dip. And we are nowhere near where housing should be if we're really taking a look at supply and demand organically. And what the report showed today is we've had 6 consecutive months of declines since the home buyer tax credit, and you probably remember that as they were, trying to sucker people into buying homes. And,
Absolutely.
Now we've got confirmation of a double dip, and Mr. Schiller himself is saying that he sees substantial losses as a potential in the future. And, I translate that directly to the stock market in that we're going to expect the same outcome there as well, because, again, we're on borrowed time, we're on borrowed money, and, all of this quantitative easing in the latest round of $600 billion of Treasury debt that we purchased, making the Federal Reserve now the largest holder of U.S. debt, is just further indication that, again, we're buying time, but that's it. And it's not going to end any differently than what we're seeing in housing right now. It's not going to end any differently than what we saw in 2008 and the systemic crisis that we just lived through. So we've got very serious, problems ahead of us. And, the big theme that I see going forward is that interest rates have nowhere to go but up. And so that's going to put more and more pressure, not only on our finances here in the country and our debt, but on the consumer, in addition to, spiraling out of control commodities prices and, oil, at $100 a barrel or getting close to it. I read an article today from the head of the IEA, which is the International Energy Agency, saying that $100 a barrel of oil would be, very bad for the consumer and very bad for the economy, and he would equate it to the same risk that we saw in 2008. Well, I think that is probably an understatement. I mean, I very likely think we could see $150 a barrel in oil
Absolutely.
At some point in the future. So I think really the confirmation is going to be in 2011. I think the confirmation will be is that the mainstream media will finally admit this year, by the end, before Christmas, that we are in a full-blown, full-scale depression here in the United States. I don't understand how you can call it anything differently than that. It's a full-blown depression. The fundamentals are horrible. They're growing worse by the day. We've got 20 cities in this country, more than likely, that will see a peak-to-trough decline in real estate of 70% or more. That is catastrophic, and, we've got a lot of trouble ahead of us. So these, of course, are all important issues we need to address.
Absolutely, and let me tell you, the mainstream media, at least their handlers that are controlling the information that goes on the teleprompters that these guys read out, it's going to be used as a tool, Christopher, at least in my conspiratorial opinion, and it's going to be a tool to distract the folks, exactly what I talked about when I opened the show, to distract folks in a left-right, blue team, red team argument. It's not going to be long. I mean, what do you mean long? I shouldn't even say that. Look at Wisconsin. Look at Indiana. We're supposed to hate the unions now. We're supposed to hate people that work for the government now. And I'm going to make it a conscious effort to say on this every night that, everybody knows somebody that our friends, our family, our loved ones work for the government. They're not the reason where we're at. They're not the reason why we're $1.65 trillion in deficit spending this year when the CBO first came out and said it was going to be 1.26. They're not the reason for this. They're not the reason why all these bailouts happened. They're not the ones who put this big con game on for the whole world to buy into a derivatives market then when they knew it was going to explode. And we got to keep that in mind, and we got to keep that message out there because if we sit there and fight amongst each other, red team, blue team, that's exactly what the powers that be anticipate and expect. And that is the only way that we can come through this as a nation, as a society, and being civil still, and not ripping each other apart. Is to direct our anger and direct our angst at the people who it deserves to be directed at, and that is a Wall Street that is completely unregulated and out of control, and that owns our representation in D.C. That's really funny. You brought up the people are going to admit that we're in the depression we're in now. I want to give you a few quotes. This was sent by 1776. Son of Liberty, and I'm going to pull up a few comments here from last night's video. Charlie, did any of these words sound familiar? There's no cause to worry. The high tide of prosperity will continue. That was from Andrew W. Mellon, the Secretary of Treasury, in 1929. June 29, 1930, the worst is over, without a doubt. James J. Davis, Secretary of Labor, 1931, the Depression has ended. That was Dr. Julius Klein, Assistant Secretary of Commerce, September 12, 1930. We have hit the bottom and are on the upswing. That was James J. Davis, Secretary of Labor, again in 1930. So these quotes is what we've been hearing, Christopher, for the last 2 years. We've been hearing the same thing. We've hit the bottom. Housing's turning around. It's going to be all champagne and caviar from here on out. Whew! Good thing we had these geniuses in the hole so they could figure out how to save the economy by printing money and issuing gimmicks like $8,000 tax credits. And if my brother, who's listening right now, and he probably is, he's very, very grateful that he got out of college and had the opportunity to take advantage of two things. One, getting out of his condominium that was greatly overpriced, and it was one of the wonderful adjusting mortgage rates. And two, I talked him into holding off before jumping into buying a property. I said, you know what, you need to rent. You need to rent now until it's hit the bottom. And all the news at the time was, well, we're at the bottom, and the government's going to give you $8,000 to step up and get yourself a new place. Everybody that I know that took advantage of the $8,000 tax credit, every single person that I know, and I'm in this business. This is what I do. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know tons of realtors. I know tons of builders, and therefore I know tons of people who bought into the $8,000 gimmick, and every single one of them, without exception, is now upside down in their home. I'm sure that is not just here in the Northwest. That is coast to coast. Housing is never recovered. It flattened out when we pumped in billions upon billions of dollars, but it is heading straight south. And truthfully, Christopher, is the housing sector going to be the least of our problems in the days and months ahead?
No, I think so. I think, the housing market is the least of our problems, and although it's been catastrophic, we're very much more focused on, geopolitics, what's going on in the rest of the world, global instability, and you made an excellent point as we, continue in phase 2 of this crisis that we're living through. It's very important, and this is what you just mentioned, that we don't fight each other. And it's also important that we understand what is occurring and why this is happening, because people never make good, coherent decisions based on emotion or when they're under heavy, duress, which I think is going to be the case, and I think we're already seeing this, even seeing this today, with, growing unrest, with, as people are saying, we almost have a genocide occurring here in Libya. We've had the Bahrain crisis, which I reported on a few weeks ago. We've got, we had Egypt, we had Greece, we've had, people are very much overlooking what's happening outside of the Middle East right now in northern Africa. China, as you probably read, they were very fearful. They've got people calling for a Jasmine revolution in China right now for, the same reasons they're calling for revolution in Egypt and the other countries that are making the big headlines right now. It's because, again, people are trying to feed themselves. They've got, 40% to 70% in some cases of their gross monthly income going to food. And, a lot of these countries have been, ruled by dictators, et cetera, et cetera. I think Gaddafi has been in power for over 41 years, if I remember correctly. But, what we need to keep in mind, and we need to understand, is that this is all a result of the failed policy response here in the United States, which started in 2008. It's due to the fact that we've kept interest rates down at zero. It's due to the fact that we've unloaded, quantitative easing to infinity, and that, the Federal Reserve and Ben Bernanke have their pedal to the metal with no intention of stopping. We're going 250 miles per hour on the train tracks right now without brakes, and this is only fueling the fire for all of these problems and all this unrest. And the mainstream media and our government is going to place blame, on this instability overseas, and use that as the blame for $150 a barrel.
Absolutely, and and they're going to blame it for the next, for fueling the depression. When in reality, all we need to do is look in our own backyard. It started here 2 years ago. The depression has not ceased. Period. Plain and simple. We're going to take our one and only break. Call in 877-342-6673 for calls for Christopher Greene or myself. We'll be right back with more Wide Awake Radio. All right, welcome back. I'm going to tap the microphone there. That was for Miss C. Gypsy because she always gets excited when I do that. So that was for you, Miss C. Gypsy. Blue Cat is made an announcement in the chat room. She runs a gardening type of business. I don't know how best to describe it. It's a seasonal business. She goes in, sets up shop, and hires local folks, and then. Doesn't have a lot of overhead, and they shut it down in the off season. But she just announced in the chat room she was going to be creating a few more positions for hire in the Chicago area. Blue, if you want to call in real quick and put out a quick minute advertisement, if you want to put out a help wanted sign, that would make me feel good. Only because we're trying not to be all doom and gloom, and I'm looking for a ray of sunshine anywhere. And if you're hiring people in a business that's going to provide food for folks, I can't think of anything more apropos than that to brighten my day anyway. So you can go ahead and call in, and we'll give you a minute to announce your deal. Christopher, all right. So we have chaos throughout the world. There's no other way to describe it. Somebody in the chat room said that. There's more going on in these Egyptian protests than Tunisia and Libya, rather than hunger. I somewhat disagree with that. I think what took the people to the streets, yes, they might there might be some agent provocateurs in and amongst the crowd, but I really think, honestly, I have no statistics to back this up, anything more than a gut feeling. I really believe that it's hard to have a sustained event like this. I mean, we could look at these so-called color revolutions of the past and see that they were intelligence apparatus projects. They're hot and heavy for a few news cycles, and then they go away. But when you have events like Tunisia's still going. I mean, they're still protesting over there. They're still protesting in Egypt. I know the mainstream media doesn't want to cover it because it's not sexy anymore because we moved on to Libya now. But, people are going out in the streets and they're staying in the streets, and I think the root cause of that is hunger. I mean, they can't afford to eat. And we see a progression around the world now. We saw the pushback. I guess when we can look at it this way, Christopher, is this. We saw the pushback in Europe over the summer, and it was because the governments of Europe were saying kind of what our government is saying now. we're gonna slash budgets, we're gonna slash services, and we're gonna cut jobs. In the UK, 500,000 jobs got shed over the summer, and people took to the streets and protest. We see that going on here now. So we're in line for what happened in Europe. The thing that's going to be a lot different, I believe, is when the folks were done throwing fits in Europe, rightfully so. The dollar hadn't collapsed, and the economy had been falsely stabilized with printing money. Every free nation on this planet joined on the central banksters program of just increasing their money supply exponentially. So all this fake recovery was reported around the world. Now we're seeing the true effects of bailouts, the true effects of corporatocracy, of crony capitalism, whatever you want to call it. And we're seeing it on the poorest on the planet first. And we're seeing the people who make $2 a day, who are spending everything they make just to eat, when they're hungry, when they can no longer afford to buy food to feed their family, they're taking to the streets en masse, and they're staying in the streets until they get some results. Period. Plain and simple. Now, the results might be the IMF swooping in, promising everything in the world, and further indebting and enslaving these people. But I think the thing that has pushed these folks to the street is absolute lack of anything else to do. There's no jobs. They can't afford food. They're at their wits' end. They've lost everything. So now, as Salente says, they're losing it. Plain and simple. Christopher?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're right. I think the main driver, to protesting in the streets, as we're seeing all over the world, is basic physiological needs, hunger, shelter. People are unemployed. But, mostly it's people are hungry. And, again, if you have 40 to 70% of your monthly income going towards food, there's a problem. And people are going to, get upset. And, in addition to that, Egypt and Greece very much has set the template for revolution all across the Middle East and all across the globe. And I think what we're seeing it in the poorest countries now, but this is very much foreshadowing what's coming to the United States. And it really makes me think of an article I read earlier this week, and I mentioned in a video that was out on USA Today, which I forget the title of it. I believe I posted it, but it basically told you how to interact with the growing subculture of unemployed here in the United States and what not to say to them. That's where we are in this country. Mm-hmm. Things are so bad that we've got mainstream media telling us how to interact and what not to say to the unemployed in this country. Because the jobs aren't coming back. And I think these basic needs, if you've taken Psychology 101 and you look at Maslow's chart, with the basic needs being at the bottom of the pyramid and self-actualization being at the top, people are just concerned about basic needs right now. And, if it costs the average American, let's say, another $300 to $500 a month just to drive to work, that's going to be a serious problem. And, we're already seeing the effects of this. I just was out in Denver for a few days about a week ago, and I noticed one of the things when we were boarding the plane is that they no longer turn the air conditioning on while we're waiting to take off. And I'm pretty sure they're doing that to conserve fuel. So, you're going to see higher fuel costs affect all kind of transportation, and it's just going to be a very big problem. So, these are all things that we're looking at, and again, it's pretty amazing to see it, but the dominoes are falling, and the next question is, who's next? Who cares about Libya? What's the next country that's going to be in complete uproar here in a few days, or maybe tomorrow, Charlie?
Yeah, and it may be tomorrow. It may be before this show's over, and that's exactly the point. Is not only are the uprisings becoming more noticeable and more violent and more hostile, they're also becoming far, far faster. We're seeing them develop, overnight in some instances. I have a story here that was on gasoline prices. And Blue Cat, I know you're on hold. I'm going to get you on in just a second here. On gasoline prices posted on CNBC, and this is some genius named Thomas Klaslow, chief analyst of OPIS, and they're talking, basically this is another propaganda piece where they come on and say, well, yeah, I know gas prices are starting to go up everywhere, but don't panic, this is going to be nothing like 2008, and in fact, I'm going to read this to you. Some traders say $4 a gasoline will be a reality in the not-too-distant future. I'm going to pause there because we already know it's a reality in California. But that might be the exception rather than the average in the United States this year, unless, this is just barely highlighted and then moved on, unless the Middle East unrest spreads to Saudi Arabia or other major oil producers. This is, this is absolutely a delusion of the facts. We see it spreading throughout Africa. The Middle East is absolutely on fire. Iran is sending warships out for the first time since 1979. We have Libya. They talk about they produce 2% of the world's oil, which is true, but there's a substantial percentage more than that runs through pipelines in their country. And one headline that I read before the show was Gaddafi is now authorizing sabotage on the infrastructure of his own country to get the rowdy citizens under control. So to think that CNBC can report something that says, don't worry about it, things are going to be okay, unless the world comes to an end. Obviously, things are going to continue to get worse in the Middle East. And as things happen faster and faster and faster, I don't think we're going to see a civil unrest over government cutbacks like as we see now, as we saw in Europe. We're not going to see them sit idle for a year. We're not going to have protests from government workers right now and then a year later have protests because food prices are too expensive. I think all these things are about to hit us at once, and it's going to be traumatic, tumultuous times in this country, Christopher, without a doubt. Now, before we go on to the next
perfect storm, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And, it reminds me of a video I posted, I believe, about 5 or 6 months ago, titled "The Calm Before the Storm." And all of this is very predictable. We very much have a chess game being played by the United States and by the rest of the world. And as a result of the systemic shakeup of this breakdown in our economy, this collapse of our system, it's clear that it's not functioning. It's pretty obvious and fairly predictable. You don't have to be a genius that we're going to be headed for a global event in a global conflict. And this is very much what I've been saying for much of the past year, and I think we're seeing it really unfold right now, again, on live TV and in real time. And, the big thing that I think to look for is, the powers that be, they need a distraction. They're going to need somebody to blame. And, nothing's easier to blame than, again, a crisis over in the Middle East, and, it's another reason to clamp down here in the United States and, to turn it into a police state of sorts. Is you probably read the article. There was an 11-year-old boy sent to jail. I don't know when this happened, but for painting stick figures or something in class. And it's just amazing. On a daily basis, we have all this freedom being taken away from us amidst the chaos. And I think people are starting to wake up to this. But we need to be really closely looking at what's happening. Again, ask the question why, and where are we being led? If we're the proverbial cows in the pasture being led a certain direction, why are they leading us down this path? Where are we going? And, I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that we're pretty much going to slaughter. So unless we start doing something positive, and again, I'm all about looking for the ray of sunshine, as you are, and rebuilding into something better. But, we need to pay attention right now because it's going to affect your way of life. It already is affecting people's way of life in this country, and it's affecting the global economy at large. So again, the house of cards is falling, and it's unfortunately going to get worse before it gets better, and it's going to be a lot worse than it would have been due to the policy response and due to the actions that our policymakers have made. It's going to be a direct consequence of it. So
I agree. I think it's coming. It's here. There is no more. That's why I put out the video a few days ago or yesterday. I'm losing track of time with all the events going on, but where I said this is it. If you're waiting for when's your neighbor going to realize that it's hit the fan, guess what? It just hit the fan. Because I don't think there's any coming back from the brink anymore. I don't think there's any more papering it over. They're not going to paper over a shortage of food. They're creating plastic rice in China for Pete's sake. They've increased their imports of corn 9 times what the U.S. government thought they were going to this year. My the produce section, produce manager of this grocery store I shop at today told me 8 of his best suppliers were wiped out by the horrible winter they've had in the south and in northern Mexico. This is all coming to a head, and it's all coming to a head very, very soon. There is a ray of hope, and I'm going to get to one little ray of hope right now, and that is entrepreneurs who are looking for ways to thrive in a breakdown economy, because that's what we have. Blue Cat, I'm going to give you a minute. I thought it was exciting news. You're actually looking for people to hire. Give us the spiel, where you're at, and your business. You got a minute? Go.
Hi, Charlie. Hi, Christopher. Thanks for letting me have a minute to
no problem.
To spread my good news that we're going to be having. Actually, I made a mistake. It was I put down 2 stores for me. I'm going to have 4 stores of my own now. We're going to also open another store, so we'll have, I think, 3 new stores open. And you could go to our website if you live in the Chicagoland region. It's obviously the suburban land area as well, and go to cloversgardencenter.com. You can fill in your little curriculum vitae in there, and just give us your information. And if you're interested in doing some retail garden center stuff, come on and work for us. It's only through it's April through August, like that time, and then we kind of open up again for pumpkin patch, and then do Christmas trees. But the point is that at least for the garden center time, we can offer you a job. So if you're interested in learning how to garden, if you're interested in helping your community and helping other people learn how to garden, and it's a fun job, it's a seasonal job, you can work on your tan, whether it's full-time or part-time, come and see me. And
right,
at least I could offer some people a job when all these people are closing. I'm opening stores.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it, and you're in the sector that I know is going to be popular this summer, and that is food. So if you're in the Chicago area...
and not only that, one more quick little announcement. We're going to be at the Chicago Garden Show. That's going to be the 5th of March through the 13th, I believe. And it's like a Saturday through that next Sunday. So come and see me. I'll be there many of the days if you're interested in talking or learning about gardening. Sometimes some people come with other garden clubs. We've had people come from Detroit, Minnesota. I mean, all around the Midwest, they come in, to come and see our show, because we have one of the really expansive garden shows for people to see. And come and see me. I'll give you some coupons, and it'll take the edge off of what you have to pay at the retail. But the thing is that I'd like to meet all of you. So come and say hi to me. And Charlie, if you want a rundown of what happened and what I saw after the show, if you want to do a show on that, some new things that are available to people.
Absolutely.
Because we said we were going to get together, but maybe after the show might be a good time to kind of give you an idea about any new type of gizmos or something that are out there to help gardeners or to help senior gardeners or any of that sort of thing.
Blue, thank you very much. I'm ecstatic over your success. I'm glad you're in a sector. Yep, I'm glad you're in a sector. It's a lot of hard work,
but it's just you just have to keep plugging away. It's 14 years of doing this season.
All right. Well,
thank you, Charlie.
You bet. Thank you. And if you want more information, you can go into the chat room, wideawakenews.com. Blue Cat is her name. She'll post whatever you need to have, whatever links you need in there. So if you're looking for a job and you live in the Chicago area and you want to learn how to garden, I highly recommend everybody learn that skill because it's going to become very economically sound for you to be able to grow what you're eating yourself. Christopher, I have about what do we got? About 7-8 minutes left. One question we had coming in was explain quantitative easing. Now I know you talk about it all the time, and so do I. But do you want to give a breakdown of what it is? I mean, this menace that we're experiencing right now, this great experiment by the Federal Reserve, by our central banksters, to try to alleviate the economic woes of this country. What it is, what it does, and how it probably will end.
Sure. Well, quantitative easing is really it's a fancy term for basically the term bailouts, and it's really a last-ditch effort by our federal government and by our Federal Reserve to really act as the buyer of last resort. And one of the big ways they're doing that is through purchasing Treasury bonds, United States Treasury debt, which we are now the largest holder of. After the purchase of the $600 billion in additional purchases that they're going to make through QE2, the United States Federal Reserve now holds over $1 trillion worth of debt, more than China, more than Japan, more than the rest of the world. So it's really what we have is an illiquid market. You can make the argument an illiquid market in the stock market. We have an illiquid market in U.S. Treasury debt. We have an illiquid market in, municipal debt, and the list goes on and on. So we really have the federal government stepping in as the buyer of last resort and funding it by printing money and through taxpayer bailouts to basically bail themselves out. And it's very much a kick the can down the road strategy, because at the end of the day, it's unsustainable. At some point, they're going to have to turn off the faucet. It's just an inevitability. And, we're going to have, I think, hell to pay, so to speak, when that happens. So I guess to sum it up, it's just a bailout nation, really.
Absolutely. Don't you find it ironic? I mean, first of all, quantitative easing is the last in the, the last in the chamber. First you lower interest rates to zero. We've done that. We've done that for years now. And when that doesn't revive your economy in the Keynesian playbook, then you commence in this quantitative easing. The government or the Federal Reserve, the banksters, buying debt. It's insane. Buying government bonds and then putting more cash into the system at debt. Every time they buy bonds, it enslaves us even further because they issue money that has debt attached to it. But the idea is to drive down. You're already at zero at the short-term interest rate, so they're trying to drive down the long-term interest rates. And Christopher, the second that they pull the printing presses away from Ben Bernanke, Katie barred the door, because everybody is going to be affected by that, believe it or not, because there's reports that I posted at Wide Awake News. Christopher, I'm sure you've read them. The nation is giddy once again with credit card spending. And just taking credit card spending alone, if long-term interest rates start to skyrocket, short-term rates are going to follow. Your interest on your credit card is going to go through the roof. If you're one of the $8,000 tax credits and you got into some kind of revolving, not a fixed 30-year, you got into something that adjusts, or you have a HELOC loan that adjusts, and the long-term interest rates start to take off, you're no longer going to be able to afford to make your mortgage payment or your second mortgage payment or your car payment or anything else, your student loan payment. It will absolutely blow this economy apart like a landmine. Am I right?
You're right, and that's the next wave of defaults. Case in point, Bank of America came out today and had a $20 billion write-down in their credit card division when they had earlier reported a $10 billion write-down. That was a big surprise to the street. BAC, or Bank of America, sold off about 4% today. So, you've got a lot of stress just with Main Street and the consumer in general. You've got a lot of people in debt, not only in their house, but on their credit cards. And, reminds me of Economics 101. One of the first formulas you learn is the GDP formula. Consumption plus investment plus government spending, parentheses, exports minus imports, or net exports. And really what the federal government is doing now is they're stimulating only one bucket in that equation, and that's G. That's government spending. That's what's accounting for, the phony GDP prints that we've been seeing that they're, talking up as being bullish. And it's all stimulus, and it's all artificial. It's very clear, and it's very easy to see, and it's only evidence, it's only an indication of how bad things truly are. And, what I find very eerie is the Federal Reserve, and I haven't heard anything from Ben Bernanke in the past few days. It's like our policymakers are just completely quiet with what is going on right now in the Middle East and, rising commodity prices and rising oil prices. And as you mentioned, Charlie, the stated purpose of quantitative easing was to keep interest rates down. Well, then it's been a dramatic failure, because what we've had over the past few months is rising interest rates, rising rates in the 10-year, rising rates at the end of the curve in the 30-year, and it's just a matter of time before we could potentially enter a period in time like many of us probably remember during the 1970s, where, again, people are lined up at the pump trying to get gas. There's insane inflation. You know, I think a U.S. Treasury bond was anywhere from 15 to 17%, you know, in the 1970s. So we could very much be looking at that, if not something worse. And, you know, that's where I think we're headed.
Well, I'm going to go with the tinfoil hat theory, which is quantitative easing was nothing more than extending and pretending that the economy is recovering, so that the too big to fail could get rid of all their sin. You know, continue with shoving it onto the backs of the American people, either, you know, giving this stuff to Freddie and Fannie, which are now our responsibility, plain and simple. And I think that's done. You know, I think it's obvious that it's done by looking at the too big to fails, which are healthy. I mean, I know they're taking a beating today, but, you know, they received record profits last year, 2010, and their balance sheets, at least on paper, at least the ones they're presenting, look good because of all of their sin has been transferred off to, you know, I don't know, who knows where. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet expanded by $2 trillion that we know about. You know, 19,000 transactions given out during the crisis days of 2008, 2009. All their sin has been made public now, and so it's time to, you know, now we're going to start to hear it's time to be fiscally conservative and start to clean house. But it's all after the fact. I mean, it's all after the people who brought us to the point of the brink, or at least said we were on the brink so they would get these ridiculous bailouts. Their sins have been forgiven. Now we're all going to get to pay for their sins. And Christopher, I don't think there's any avoiding. I don't think there's any going back now. I'm put the video out saying this is it because I truly believe the toothpaste is out of the tube, the train has left the station, whatever analogy you want to use, it's go time. Am I wrong?
Charlie, you're right. We've spun out of control. We're going to pay the piper at some point. You know, we're clearly moving down a path that is unsustainable. And look, I just view it as kind of the last hurrah. It's the last big party on Wall Street. They very much have the intention to, you know, rape and pillage the village and really to milk it for all it's worth. You know, so I really hope that they enjoy, you know, paying all these record bonuses and really just milking everything they can, you know, on the backs of the American people. Because when we do reach the full-blown crisis mode and we have that systemic event again, a la 2008, which I think we're going to have in 2011, I know exactly how they're going to respond, Charlie, and I know exactly what they're going to say. And that is, we never saw it coming.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you're one of the masses, you might believe it, but more and more people are waking up every single day. And I know they don't want a nation of wide-awake people. I know they don't want that. So we're going to see this progress faster and faster, and it's going to blindside this country. I'm just afraid to say that, but that is what I feel at the bottom of my heart. I think it has begun. So Christopher Greene, thank you very much. GreeneWave.com is his website. Go check it out. GREENE Wave, WAVE.com. Check out his site. Thank you very much for being on. We'll get you on again real soon. Tomorrow night I'm going to try to get Dimcat on here. I'm trying to get all my favorite YouTubers on before it's too late. Jeff Rent's coming up next.